Hello everyone, welcome to Voting Trend for August 31st. My name is Dave Trotter, and we're going to be delving into the Bloomberg polls that were done by Morning Consult. We're going to do those. We're also going to go into the Emerson College polls because both of them have a lot of swing states. So we're going to go ahead and look at those polls and then do my projection at the end of where I think the election is right now. A few things I want to mention. So somebody made a comment on my video, and I think it was meant to be a dig, but it's actually a really good comment, and forgive where the periods are and how this is written, but this is what the person said. Paul here says, "You do know all these early polling, period, are worthless until real voting happens." And you know what? That is true. People need to remember that polling is not a predictive tool. It gives you a snapshot in time of the universe that you are polling, that you were surveying, okay? The only way that these polls become the actual election results is if 100% of these people actually go out to vote, and that vote is thus representative of the population as a whole, which it is to a certain extent. That's why we have margin of error. So it's important to know that these polls just give us a lay of the land. They are not gospel. No one should be using these as gospel, and this is the reason why when people like Nate Silver use it as a predictive model, which is a nowcast model, it's not a forecasting model. When they use it as a predictive model, it only applies if those people turn out, and only applies for right now. So that is very important. Turnout. Every election is a turnout election. When they say, oh, this is a turnout election or that's a turnout election, every election is a turnout election. If your side doesn't turn out, you lose. If the other side turns out, they win. That's just how it works. All right, so let's go ahead and go into three polls that are just kind of crap that we're not going to include and look at. So we have this Epic MRA poll out of Michigan that shows Donald Trump winning by 1, but there are 0 crosstabs. There's some crosstabs that relate to absolutely nothing. And as far as I'm concerned, we can't even use this poll in anything. Same thing with the Ipsos poll, which is unfortunate because they're quite reputable. They could provide crosstabs, but they provide no crosstabs whatsoever, except for registered voters who identify as Democrat, Republican, or Independent. So those are basically useless crosstabs. Then the final one I came across, and I've seen this one on 538, and I have a lot of problems with 538, but this is one of them, this Outward Intelligence poll that shows Harris up by 5%, and all they got is a top line head-to-head, and then just a trend. There's nothing whatsoever as far as crosstabs. And on top of that, I decided to look up this Outward Intelligence and see who they are. And here is the information about their company and stuff like that. And they have like no employees listed. It's like, who's your CEO? Who's your person in charge of data? Who's your methodology person? Who's your whatever? There's nothing here. And this is one of the problems I do have with polls. It's just every Tom, Dick, and Harry is all of a sudden having a polling firm. And sometimes they might end up being there to confirm some sort of bias or not. So I don't like these polls at all, so we're not even going to include those. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the Morning Consult polls where they look at a number of swing states. And we're going to see if these things are kind of spot on or not, because I think looking at them initially, they look a little bit off. So let's look at first, the Morning Consult Arizona poll, which has amongst likely voters, Kamala Harris up by 2. This is the thing that really got to me. It was like the male voters, Donald Trump's only winning by 2%. We know that that margin's higher, so this poll might actually be a little bit closer. The age distribution looks about what we should expect from these polls, so it's just that male number that looks off, and even the female number, 44 to 50, that seems a little bit close, but the male to female number looks way off. Hispanic voters in Arizona, she's winning Hispanic voters 64 to 33%, which again goes with my narrative, the 3 pillars she needs to do: solidify Hispanic voters, solidify young voters, solidify moderate voters. And you'll see in this poll, you can actually see that she solidifies moderate voters as well. So if we look at moderates, 57% of moderates are going for Kamala Harris, whereas only 34% of moderates are going for Donald Trump. And if we look at this urban, suburban, rural, it's not unlikely for Donald Trump to be winning amongst suburban voters in Arizona and the Phoenix area, whatever. I showed you that in another video where I broke down how the northern and western suburbs, like Sunrise and all those other places, are more Republicans. Overall, I think this is a decent poll, except for that male number. That is a big caveat, which makes me think that this poll is actually more of a tie poll. Now, let's go to the next state. So our next state that we have is Georgia, and we see amongst likely voters, Kamala Harris is again up by 2%. And again, this is, you're seeing, and this is a problem I have, a huge problem I have with the morning consult polls. It's showing that Donald Trump is only up by 2 amongst male voters. However, it only shows Kamala Harris is up by 3 with female voters. So this makes me think both of these bad bits of data kind of cancel each other out, which means that the numbers that we see actually might be representative of the population. Kamala Harris is winning with 18 to 34-year-olds, and the age distribution looks about what we should expect. Actually, this age distribution does look good, especially for a southern state. Hispanic voters are not going to make a difference in Georgia. However, we see black voters 78 to 16%. I still say that 16% is a little bit high based on 2008-2012 results, but we will see 16% could be in line with what we saw in 2020. And then if we look at moderate liberals, conservatives, we see conservatives at 10%. Some of the polls that we saw by Fox News, I don't know if you remember, and you can watch that video again, the Fox News polls really showed conservative numbers going toward Kamala Harris, like 16 to 20%, which was odd. This seems a little bit more in line with what we should expect, with moderates going 60 to 32 for Kamala Harris. And also the suburban area, we see Kamala Harris doing a little bit better. I think that percentage could be a little bit higher, but it all depends on what they consider the suburban area to be. And do, you know, cities like Savannah, Macon, maybe Valdosta and others, do those count as suburban, even though they're not suburban of Atlanta, but they're not rural either. So that all depends. All right, let's go to our next poll. All right, so our next poll is Michigan, and of likely voters, we see again Kamala Harris up by 2, but we see this is where it's not a good poll, I don't think, because Kamala Harris is winning male voters by 2%. There's no way she's winning male voters in Michigan by 2%. We also see her losing with 18 to 34-year-olds, and then just cleaning Trump's clock when it comes to middle-aged voters. That is totally not in line with what we are seeing. You see 15% of conservatives are going with Kamala Harris, which is a little bit high. We see the moderates solidifying behind her, 59 to 32%. And when it comes to urban, that urban number is way too low for Kamala Harris. So this tells me that black voters in the urban areas were undersampled. The suburban numbers are aligned with what we should have, and the same thing with other numbers. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the Nevada poll, which looks a little bit better-ish. We have Kamala Harris up by 2 in Nevada in this morning council poll. The male numbers going for Trump, the female numbers going for Harris, but maybe not as big of a gap, so they could cancel each other out. The 18 to 34s are voting for Harris, but the middle-aged voters are doing significantly better for Kamala Harris as well, more than we should expect. That number should probably be a little closer, but in Nevada, it's a transient state, or at least a state that is being built by Northerners moving there, and sometimes the more liberal Northerners are moving to the suburbs of Clark County, so that might not be necessarily incorrect. And then she's losing significantly by with 65 and older voters. There aren't any Hispanics are a big group of the voting bloc here in Nevada, and I'm just surprised that they are not sampled. So you have ethnicity, white, non-Hispanic, and there are no Hispanic voters in this sample. That is a big oversight. Why were they not able to put Hispanics in the gross stabs? Why were they not able to get a big enough sample to actually put them in? That's making me think that the Nevada numbers are way more for Harris than this poll actually indicates, and it's making me feel a little bit more confident with that. If we look at liberal, moderate, and conservative, same thing. We're seeing her solidify the moderate vote, 52 to 34. Urban, suburban, and they don't even have rural, which kind of shocks me at all. They're missing a few crosstabs here. Urban, 54 to 41. I assume that's just going to be all of Clark County. Suburban, 44 to 49. Those look pretty spot on as well. Now, the one thing I'd like to see is if they actually have union households, which we know would be probably much, much stronger for Kamala Harris. So that's another thing. These union households in some of these states should be going more Democratic, especially in a state like Nevada, where the unions are more likely going to be Democratic. I think it's undersampling the Democrats. I think the Democrats are actually doing better than we think in Nevada. Okay, so let's go to the next one. All right, so the next one is North Carolina. And if we look here, it shows Kamala Harris and Donald Trump amongst likely voters dead even. We see Donald Trump winning slightly with male voters and Kamala Harris winning slightly with female voters. I think these gaps are probably bigger, but it kind of makes them a little bit better. The age distribution looks actually spot on what we should be expecting. Younger voters going one way, middle-aged voters going toward Trump, and then 65 and older is kind of split. That's what we should be expecting. Amongst black voters, this looks a little bit more in line, 14%. These numbers look much, much better and much, much more accurate. If we go ahead and go down to moderate, liberal, conservative, again, we're seeing Kamala Harris solidify that moderate vote, 56 to 34. If we look in the urban part of the state, which the urban part of the state in North Carolina doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go extremely Democratic, but we do see the suburban areas which can kind of go in there. And again, I don't know if some place like Asheville is considered rural or suburban. These numbers look spot on and look really good. We got 13% of conservatives also going for Kamala Harris. We'll see what happens. But this poll from North Carolina, where it shows it tied, but amongst registered voters, it actually shows that Kamala Harris up by 1. That's a good sign for Kamala Harris. I'm starting to think that North Carolina is someplace that we can put in a Democratic column. Okay, let's go to the next state. All right, the next state is Pennsylvania, and we show amongst likely voters a 5-point lead for Kamala Harris. Now, amongst male voters, she's winning, which is weird. We know that's not the case. So, and she's winning a majority, which would be very, very odd. That in and of itself, I would throw this poll out because it shows it's showing that she's winning male voters more than she's winning female voters. That in and of itself is a garbage poll. And really, I don't even know if we need to look at the rest because that in and of itself is bad. But the age distribution looks, the top and bottom, 18 to 34 and 65 looks fine, but the 35 to 44 and 45 to 64 look kind of mixed. It doesn't look quite right. Let's see, Democratic men, Republican women. Yeah, ideology, she is solidifying the moderate vote. She's not getting much of the conservative. Suburban, she's dominating. Rural, okay. I mean, all the other numbers look fine. This Pennsylvania poll doesn't look the best because of those gender numbers. You can throw those out, but then you can also say they have a canceling effect on each other. I still think the key to win in Pennsylvania is turnout in Philadelphia. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is Arizona, where Donald Trump is winning in this Emerson poll, 50 to 47%, which is a little bit closer than what we've seen. It's within the margin of error, so we're really starting to see that Arizona is a toss-up state. Now, if we look at some of the crosstabs in this, we see again Kamala Harris solidifying Hispanic voters, winning them 60 to 37%. The only thing about this poll, it's a little bit suspicious, is there are very, very few undecideds or don't knows or somebody else, which seems a little bit weird. As far as age distribution goes, 18 to 29-year-olds going for Kamala Harris, but then as soon as you get to 30 to 39-year-old, it's shifting 57, 58%. No, it's not that high. This makes me think Kamala Harris is doing a lot better in this poll. And then 70 and older, basically it's a tie. This age distribution right here is very suspect. So I really don't think that it is the best choice that we have. Now, if we look at male-female voters, again, we're seeing Kamala Harris just barely win in the female voters. So, but then we see it closer amongst male voters, but barely win the female voters. I'm saying that this poll is a little bit closer for Kamala Harris. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the Emerson poll from Georgia, which shows Kamala Harris up 49 to 48. So that is good for Kamala Harris. And we're starting to see those Georgia numbers come around for the Harris campaign again. If we look at distribution of race, we see, again, Hispanics solidifying the Hispanic vote, but it doesn't matter as much in Georgia. Everything here looks good. Age distribution, 60. This age distribution looks a lot better. So I'm thinking this poll is spot on. And if we look at gender, we see male voters. Kamala Harris is losing pretty significantly. Female voters gaining pretty significantly. So this Georgia poll by Emerson looks really, really good. Let's go over to the Michigan crosstab. As we see in the Michigan crosstab, we have Kamala Harris winning 50 to 47%. So if we take the decimals actually and look at them, this actually goes outside of the margin of error. So that's actually giving Kamala Harris the lead here in Michigan. So Michigan is starting to be taken off a little bit. So off the radar a little bit, and the Democrats can play a lot more on offense there. Let's go down to some of our other crosstabs that we have. Hispanic voters aren't going to matter as much. White voters, there's a lot of white liberals in Michigan, so those numbers seem about right. When it comes to 18 to 29-year-olds, there we go, 62%. And then the distributions as we expect for the other ones. And if we look at male and female voters, yep, we see Donald Trump doing well with male voters and Kamala Harris doing better with female voters. So this Michigan poll looks good. It's outside the margin of error for the Harris campaign. So this is really putting Michigan into a safer spot. Okay, let's go to the Nevada poll. Okay, in this Nevada poll, we have Kamala Harris up by 1, 48 to 49. Now, this is where Hispanic voters are going to make a more significant difference. So we can see here Hispanic voters, 61.6% for Kamala Harris to 35.5%. This is where she wants to be. This is actually a good number for her. If we look at age distribution, again, the Emerson poll shows age distribution a little bit better for Kamala Harris, making a lot more sense. So you see her winning essentially 70% of 18 to 29-year-olds, but as the ages get older, you start seeing those numbers go further down and down, which makes sense. Again, Kamala Harris not doing as well with male voters, and I mean, it's basically a flip between male and female voters. So unlike the Morning Consult poll, which had really dubious numbers when it came to the gender split, these Emerson polls seem to be doing a little bit better. And I'm not usually a fan of Emerson polls, but this one looks pretty good. All right, in the state of North Carolina, we have Donald Trump up by 1, so definitely within the margin of error. The thing I'm looking for is to see if black voters are going strongly for Donald Trump. They are not. They're at 11%. This is what I'm expecting from most of the polls. This poll has been quite interesting. Now, the Hispanic voters, though they're not going to play as much of a role in North Carolina, she hasn't solidified them there, but she doesn't need to solidify them there. She has to worry more about this 85.8% of black voters turning that vote out. If she turns that vote out, then it's a good day for Kamala Harris. And if we look at age distribution, about the same. She's winning more of the millennial vote more than the Gen Z vote, I would say. But these numbers look about spot on. 54%, 55% for 18 to 29s, 57%, 30 to 39, 50.1%, 40 to 49. This distribution looks exactly how we've been seeing in other polls. And if we look at male-female again, we see the male voters going disproportionately for Donald Trump and the female voters disproportionately for Kamala Harris. Again, this is a key as to whether these polls are good. Okay, let's go to Pennsylvania. Okay, now in this poll, we have them tied both 48 to 48. She is still solidifying the Hispanic vote, but black vote 89 to 4. So that means she's doing a lot worse with white voters, okay? This poll doesn't give us a rural, urban, suburban distribution. That would be nice. It would give us a little bit more information. But as you can see, she's doing really, really well with the 18 to 29-year-olds. And it's interesting because this poll actually looks a little bit more accurate with age distribution because it shows 50 to 59-year-old being Donald Trump's strongest group, which it has been in most of the polls. And then once you get with older voters, it ticks up a tad bit more for the Democrats. So the age distribution looks good here. As far male, female, this distribution looks fine. Yeah, this Pennsylvania poll shows it tie, and I don't see anything wrong with it. So Democrats need to start worrying about Pennsylvania, I think. And then finally, let's go over to Wisconsin, where we now have Kamala Harris up, or down. Actually, it shows Donald Trump up 49 to 48, which is very interesting because I think most people are starting to put Wisconsin out of the reach of the Republicans. We do have black voters playing a little bit. I would even say they're undersampled. They do play a little bit more of a role in parts of Racine, Milwaukee County, definitely. This white distribution seems about right. I think it'd be a little closer considering you have Dane County and others that would make that a little bit closer. Age distribution. This age distribution seems a little bit more favoring Donald Trump. So this might be why this poll is a little bit closer, while other Wisconsin polls are showing a significant swing to Kamala Harris, is because you're showing these younger voters not going with Kamala Harris as strong as you would expect them to go. So that seems a little bit off. Male, female voters, that distribution seems fine. So yeah. So in this situation, I think the Emerson polls look a lot better than the morning consult polls. The problem with those morning consult polls is those gender gaps are so narrow, and the fact in one of the states Kamala Harris is winning amongst male voters, that just does not make sense. So I kind of throw those away. But this was a long video because we were going into a ton of swing state crosstabs. But what do I have as far as my overall picks? Well, this is kind of how I look at the electoral map right now. These Nevada numbers and Arizona numbers are getting closer, and I think that with turnout, it does help the Democrats. I have the Democrats at 303 and Republicans at 235, which means that the Democrats have a little bit more to play for in this map. Even if we took out, I'm thinking Georgia's solidifying more as well. There's any that I would say maybe the Democrats have to worry about, it's Pennsylvania. But even if you lose Pennsylvania and you win Georgia and Michigan, you can lose Arizona, and that's about it. You still have to win in Nevada, which I've mentioned in other videos with Nevada, that Nevada is one of those states where Republicans poll better, but then the actual turnout in the machine, the Democrats have a good machine in Nevada, a really, really good machine. The turnout ends up favoring the Democrats. So that's why I'm still putting Nevada in the Democratic column. Slightly, but in the Democratic column nonetheless. But I do think, as of right now, it looks more like this. I think this is where we're at right now. All right, thank you all very much. I'll be back tomorrow, or maybe it's the weekend, so there might not be many polls, but we'll talk about some other things. So thank you all very much. Make sure to subscribe. Join my Substack. It's listed down below, and have a wonderful day. See you all later. Bye-bye.